You are now listening to the Nexus Radio Podcast. I'm your host, DJ Sid. Thanks for tuning in. So welcome to episode number 5. I told you I'd get these out really quickly. I'd just like to say that today is the day. I'm actually recording this today. I'm going to release it today, August 2nd, 2013. This is the day that Sony unveils EverQuest Next. Finally, the day is here. Can you believe it? Time flies. Anyway, wanted to talk a little bit about this podcast. It's another special one. Finally had a chance to collaborate with a few people, and I'd like to introduce them in this episode of the podcast. I would like to say that unfortunately, the recordings didn't come out too well. They're okay. Of course, this is just the first episode in the collaboration series that we're going to be doing. We're going to have a lot more guest speakers on the podcast, but let me just introduce the two people that are going to be featured in the collaboration cast section of this podcast. The first guest is Midian. He's actually the site owner and creator of EQNexus.com. And our next guest is going to be Phantomex. He's actually in charge of the social media on EQNexus.com. And of course, yours truly is also involved in the collab cast. Pretty much I'm just moderating, giving a few thoughts, but those two, I'm asking them the questions and they're giving the answers. So it's good to hear some more voices on the cast. Hope you guys enjoy it, and let's get into it. So the first topic of discussion is going to be expectations for SOE Live. Will EverQuest Next be playable for the convention?
This is Phantomex. I think so. It sounds like it's going to be. There's several people that have mentioned on Twitter and other places, employees, that they've seen a live demo. Who knows what demo means, but I think there probably will be a playable version. To what extent, though, who knows? I hope so.
And this is Midian. My theory at this point is that there will be some sort of playable demo at SOE Live. And my thought process is that there will be a demo that will also go out with every PlayStation 4 that launches. Now, I don't know if that necessarily is going to correlate with the launch date, but at this point, I'm pretty much guessing that they've said that they're going to have something playable this year. So with all the kind of news buzzing around right now, I can pretty much guarantee that they're going to have some type of playable demo.
And this is Sid. I think that Sony will have something to show. I think it's going to be a game that's just about complete. They had a lot of time to work on this and to perfect it and get it right. I don't think there's anything really stopping them from not showing up with all the classes, all the zones ready to go, ready to be viewed, and they can run around and grab a quest and show off the story bricks, elements, and all that good stuff. And again, we'll talk about that later in the collaboration. But I truly believe that they had the time to really get this right. You know what I mean? It's going to be something special to witness, something special to watch, and we'll just have to wait and see in a few hours when Sony releases and unveils their game.
Next thing kind of to talk about is what do you think the beta process or dates are going to be? With live coming, what can we sort of expect afterwards?
A lot of the rumors that we have flying around right now is that it's going to be immediately after SOE Live. They've kind of kept this in a black box because they want to release it as close to the date that they're going to announce the stuff, because they don't want a lot of competition in the newer things that they're going to be doing. So it would only make sense to me that towards their announcement, especially if they're going to have some type of playable demo, that will go immediately from their internal testing with black box and go directly into beta testing. So I would expect within a week or two of SOE Live, they're going to go right off of the momentum that they have and just go right into it. I think it would be the best course of action for them.
Absolutely, and I totally agree with you mid there. The game, they want to get this out, by the end of the year, maybe even early next year. Sooner the better for us, but, Sony's in a position right now where they need to really stress test the game, see what it's capable of, see what it can handle, and then make any changes before they release it. Definitely looking at Titan and halting their process to kind of see, what they want to do in terms of, getting their game out and, seeing what Sony's going to do with EQN. And I think we're going to have a beta very shortly as well.
Yeah, I think you guys are probably right on. The biggest thing that gets thrown out when this is asked is, well, they restarted the game less than a year ago. They said, well, we're starting over from scratch, and I think people misunderstand what scratch means. They've been doing this for several years. They didn't start over with a brand new game engine, brand new art, brand new coding. They started over with how we actually will interact with the game, and I think it's very much possible that much of a change is not a huge change, meaning that we could get into this right away. And I think y'all are right that the black box theme is something that nobody else has done, and I actually think that's part of why it's generated so much hype. But everyone else sort of lets on to what they're doing. That's just not the case here, all the way up until the day before the reveal, and there's a very good reason for that. And I think you're correct. They don't want other people getting to these ideas right away. They want to grab people for a year or more before anything else starts getting released with these features. I think Storybricks is probably one of the big ones. They're not letting anybody know about Storybricks really of anything because, and I assume they also probably have them under some sort of contract, but I think it's all ready to go.
And just to touch a little bit again on that, I think it's a brilliant idea from a marketing standpoint as well, and I also think it shows a lot of confidence in their title. If they are, in fact, going to be releasing it at the end of this year or early next year, and it's so close to the day that they're announcing it, there's not going to be really those ebb and flows that you have when you announce an MMO title and then you go through the years and years of releasing screenshots showing the next developmental phase. If they can hit it right and they trend really well coming off of SOE Live, the marketing is just going to be able to ramp up really quickly and then get the game out there. And I expect, because of SOE's kind of the way that they're building their games, that it's going to be a lot of player-driven content within their game as well. So I think that they really don't need to necessarily build this whole theme park like they did with like Star Wars The Old Republic or something like that, where they took 6 years to create these intricate quests with all these cutscenes and everything. I think they're going to really depend on their community to kind of add that flavor to it. So I'm really excited. I think it's a great marketing ploy for them to keep it completely under wrap and then just be like, oh yeah, it's coming out and it's going to be coming out in 3 months.
So next up, the next topic for discussion is actually going to be sandbox gameplay. I want to throw this question at you, Fan. Basically, define sandbox as you see it.
Well, I think that's actually really hard to do because there's really not been much out there that is a sandbox game that many people play, and it's a very broad definition. I think what defines a sandbox for me is just that the player can do whatever they want to do. If I want to pop in and raise cattle and sell their milk, skin them later for other products, that then I should be able to do that. If I want to go out and raid and slay dragons, then I should be able to do that. And that's something that's just not really out there right now. So I don't know how easy or hard that is to do. I'm hopeful. I like the idea, but That's what it means to me. I should just be able to do whatever I want, pop into the game, spend 20 minutes doing nothing even, and still somehow progressing in a way that's comfortable for me. I don't want to feel pushed to meet certain goals every step of the way.
Absolutely. Very good points there. And, a lot of the sandbox games that are out today are pretty much as you described. They're, you log in and you build your own world, basically, and you can do it with other people. Now, pointing at you, Mid, can you define a sandbox game in your own words?
Well, I think there's multiple variations of what someone would consider a sandbox, but I consider a sandbox any type of game that has a world in which you can affect it. I would think, there's been a lot of games that have come out in the last 5 or 6 years that have been considered themselves sandbox, but they really haven't done very well. And some people consider a sandbox as things where you don't have any instruction. You get dropped into a world in which you have no point of direction and you just have to kind of find your own way. So, for me, a sandbox is simply that you have some type of effect on the world, be it player-generated content. I consider Star Wars Galaxies a sandbox because there was player-made cities. The vendors had all the gear that were in the cities, and the players were a very vital part of the world. So for me, I would consider Star Wars Galaxies probably one of the best sandboxes ever released.
Absolutely. Star Wars Galaxy was definitely the first MMO sandbox that was released under SOE and under any studio. And, I had the pleasure of playing that game as well. And, to experience a world like that was astounding. And I'm hoping they put that technology that they had in Star Wars Galaxies, the housing and all that stuff that was not instanced, into the EverQuest Next world. I think sandboxing is probably going to be one of the waves of the future in terms of gaming. Most notable sandbox, probably the most acclaimed sandbox, Minecraft, if you guys had the pleasure of playing, is very interesting of how they implement their own, version of sandboxing. And wonder if the designers of EverQuest Next will actually implement some of those ideas into their own game.
I wish I never got a chance to play Star Wars Galaxy, but everyone says, that's really what we should shoot for. What I wish I could have seen was the crafting and just how that plays into everything. That and the housing are the two things I hear more than even combat. So I think it's a good sign that a lot of these games are all under the Sony banner. Now that being said, also I guess it was Sony that sort of destroyed the fun nature of Star Wars Galaxies, but I think they are learning. So I'm very hopeful for next.
Absolutely. Now, one more question at you, Fan. How do you think that crafting factions housing, as you just mentioned, how do you think that would impact the game's secondary paths?
My personal opinion on all that is actually they shouldn't be secondary paths. I think you look at crafting and some of those professions, they should be, in a sandbox world, they should be just as important as someone who goes out and just does combat. That's my thought. Should we be able to do anything we want? Sure. If I want to spend my time half and half going out and doing combat, coming back and doing crafting, that's fine. But I actually feel like, for me, and the way my opinion has always been, it shouldn't be a secondary system. It shouldn't be a game within the larger combat game. It really should have meaning for me. I don't know that they'll push it that far, but when I envision this, my hope is to actually have a system where if you just wanted to be a tailor, you could become the tailor on your server that everyone knows because you spent just as much time doing that as the person who's the top rater. That's the kind of, I want equal but different rewards out of the different paths. Taking it even further, diplomacy, if they enter that into the game. Well, let's say my path or my career path in this game is not combat, but to be a mayor of a town. That I actually think all of this should be independent. Are you going to have very few people that want to do only crafting versus combat? Sure, but those are people should be satisfied just as much with what they do as the person who goes out and raids 5 days a week.
Absolutely. I see you referring to more of a Vanguard Saga of Heroes type of, dual system for adventurers and artisans. That's more something that I feel that a lot of people are going to want in the game as a quote, MMO 2.0 in terms of how they implement the dynamics of the game. And I want to direct that same question at you, Midian. What do you think the impact on the game paths will be? Well, as I asked Phantom.
It's a very good question because it really defines what the gameplay is going to be like in a whole if they have to do it right. So if you want a system where crafting is actually important and viable and you can have a career path with that, then you're going to have a world that needs crafters. In games like World of Warcraft, you don't need crafting. I mean, you can craft certain things to help, get an extra piece of gear here or there, but you can ultimately get that gear from doing dungeons or raids. In a game like Star Wars Galaxies, in which you really didn't have gear drop, it was only made by players. The crafters kind of relied on the people to go out and get things for them, but the people that went out to get stuff required the gear that the crafters had. So it was kind of like this symbiotic relationship between the crafters and the actual people that went out and did the action. So I don't think that they're going to go that way with EverQuest Next, just because EverQuest has always been a game where you go out and you do raids to get gear. But maybe they're going to find a system where crafting is going to be relatable to the world. And if they can hit that balance, I think it's going to really revolutionize the industry, because there hasn't been really that many games other than, say, EVE Online or, I hate to go back to it, but Star Wars Galaxies. Those were the two big games that really required a symbiotic relationship between your fighters and your adventurers, and also your crafters, who were vital to get the gear that you needed to do stuff.
I just really feel they should be just as important. I'm just as much as probably other folks in World of Warcraft. I'm the type that, okay, I read up on something, my DPS is going to be better as an enchanter, so I go look up how to level the fastest, and within a weekend I'm at max. And that, I've done that, and I just don't want to see that sort of mentality. If I want to be, I think they should be equal rewards, equal time spent too. I think there should be a comparable piece of gear for raiding and crafting equal. But at the same time, you should only be able to, if you only have 2% of the population actually being able to raid for that piece of gear, you should really only have 2% of your crafting population that can do equal gear. To me, that's a big part of it. If I wanted to be a trader, I set up a shop, people come sell me their goods, I sell it back out for a little bit of a commission. I just think you can find roles. If you don't do that part of it, I do think you're going to leave out a significant population of people who would play the game. Now, not nearly as much as raiders. I mean, that's what most of the folks want to do. But you have a pretty big crafting population out there, a bunch of people who I think would latch onto this game where they might not have before, just if that's what they did. It can become social for them just as much as playing a game on Facebook or something like that is.
Absolutely. Excellent points, gentlemen. I think you both are going towards a player-driven community, which is, again, that's MMO 2.0 theory. That's that next step where I also believe that the MMO should be heading for, because that just brings communities together. It brings players together. You know, it just makes for a better world, and not just a better world, but a more robust world, and you know, a world that lasts over the course of the game's history and lifespan. So as we just were discussing Sandbox and how Sandbox gameplay will affect and be implemented into the EverQuest Next world. Question for you, Midian. Implications for a class system in terms of Sandbox gameplay. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it all comes down to the way that they want to view things. I mean, at this point, I don't think that they're going to have a Sandbox class system because a Sandbox class system would have no classes, and they're already announced that they're having a panel on the classes. So I think they're going to go with a more traditional style of class system. Now, how they might switch that up by allowing one character to level multiple classes. I know that they've stated before that they're really into the Final Fantasy style system, which if you guys are not familiar with it, you could level one class and then reset. I mean, you would have to re-level the same a different class, but it could be on the same character. So you could have multiple classes on the same character, but you wouldn't be able to be that class at the same time. I kind of like that system. But as far as like a pure Sandbox system, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of a system where you can be all things all the time. I really am one of those players who really identify with a class, and if I'm a bard, I like to be known as a bard, and I like to be able to known as like what my skill level is as that bard. So for me, having a class is very important for my identity within the world. So I'm not a big fan of it, but what are you guys' thoughts?
You know, I see where they're coming from. One of the things that I hated doing is if I decided, again, to throw back to, EverQuest, I was a druid for a very long time, that ended up switching over to an enchanter. You level up the process. People don't know your name like they did your first character. Same way with World of Warcraft or EverQuest 2. You start off, decide to switch halfway through. That can become kind of a pain. So I can see that part of it, and I think that's what some of the devs were kind of getting at, that for them, they don't want to have to start all over with a brand new identity. They want to just be able to say, okay, if I want to change my mind and instead of a druid, I want to be a ranger, be able to do that process. Now, I share your concern. I don't want it to happen over the course of a day. I think that's fine by me, but if that's the process, then you really have to go through the leveling process again. You don't necessarily have to start a new character, but you really need to go back and just do everything all over again. The question I don't know how to answer is, well, okay, let's say you do that. You get to max level 50 on both characters, and you've played your ranger for a while. You want to go back to druid. Are you going to be allowed to just switch back level 50 druid because that's what you've already done? I don't know how they would do that. That's the part that sort of worries me, because you could get people with enough time, 5, 6 different level 50 characters, and if not implemented correctly, they could just pick, a click of a button and they switch. I don't necessarily like that. I also don't like the idea of just having a broad open, you have no class, you just pick your skills. I think there should be some sort of niche for each group. So it's a hard balance. I do think switching is okay by me as long as it's done correctly. In many ways, it makes sense, especially as I'm starting to move into sort of a casual nature of gameplay.
I want to just give my thoughts on the implications for a class system as well. I'm kind of on the fence or split between the both of you. I kind of liked the original EverQuest 2 design of archetypes, where you'd have like a fighter, your mage, your priest class, and your melee classes, your damage per second classes. And then as you go through the levels, you find yourself more along the path of, say, let's say you're a fighter and you say, you kill, fuzzy bunnies and you start to become evil. So you may go down the path of a Shadow Knight. But unfortunately, the way EverQuest 2 designed the archetypes, they kind of overcomplicated it. I think that was too much. I think if you start with kind of like a core class and then you mold yourself into, like, say, a paladin or something like that for being good, that's a good way to go. In terms of sandbox gameplay, not sure how that would work. Something that I would like to see. I mean, all the ideas that you guys threw out were pretty good. I mean, I can't really compete, but, something that I personally want to see is a class system. The good old class systems from the early days of MMOs. I think that was, it's pretty, keep it simple. So the next topic up for discussion is lore predictions. Phantom X, got a question for you. Races. Who's in? Who's out?
I really don't know. I hope they keep some of the more classic ones. I really don't know. I think you can assume that the originals will hopefully be there. The sketches that came out, the artwork is kind of interesting to see how they've depicted some things differently, and I know folks have tried to break that down. Kobold being one of them. I really don't know. I think that's going to be one of the more interesting parts of the reveal, is who's in and who's out. Do they just throw everyone in, or do they limit it? There's certainly ones I don't want to see in. Some of them from EverQuest 2, some of the later additions to the original EverQuest. I don't like the Fae. I don't like having the fairy wings and all that. I do hope they keep in some of the original things. I think you can assume a few flavors of elves, humans, ogres, barbarians, hopefully some of the lizard men. But that's one I think that's not really been led on. There's a lot, if you piece together the clues over the last 6 months, you can sort of really get a good picture of this game and what it's going to be. That however, is just one of them that they've not really led on, except for this artwork. So unfortunately, I just don't have a good idea or opinion, really.
Let me direct that question at you, Midian. Races. Who's in, who's out, in your opinion?
Well, from a historical standpoint, EverQuest kind of adds races into their game instead of subtracts them. So from a logical standpoint, I would think that we would be looking at every race that's ever been entered. Now, I'm right along the lines of Phantom X. I don't like the Faes. I don't think they really have a place within the universe. But really, one of the great things about EverQuest is their variety of races. If you look at other games like Rift, where they're pretty much all humanoids, right? So for EverQuest, I've always really been fascinated with all their different races, and I really think it goes back to the fact that they've created a world and a universe. So I really don't see them removing the races from that world and universe. I just really see them adding upon it. So I think if they're not all in at launch, I think they will be shortly. I don't think that they can leave out classes like Iskars, or is that how you pronounce it? The Lizardmen. You're going to have a lot of people upset if you don't have the specific races that they played, but you definitely expect to see ogres and trolls and halflings and all these wonderful races that we have grown to love.
Absolutely. Definitely the core races are going to be there. There's no doubt about that. The races that came later, like the Froglock and the Vashir, and I believe the Kishan from EverQuest 2, is that how you pronounce that? Those races, we'll just have to see, I guess. Speculation, of course, of what's going to be there. So the next question under the lore predictions topic is geared towards the game world. Do you think it's going to be old world EverQuest, or is it going to be post-shattering of EverQuest 2? This question is actually directed back at you, Phantom X.
I don't think it's any of it. I think what they have said to be prepared for an alternate Norath is probably true. think that all three are actually, my opinion is that somehow they're going to connect. You look at where the directions for EverQuest and EverQuest 2 are both going right now. The storyline, the main storyline with the new content, actually sort of puts them at a path to overlap, where time really isn't mattering anymore. My prediction is that eventually here at Live, when they announce the expansion, somehow that's all going to tie into Next, that these are all sort of going to come out together somehow. I don't think it's going to be a big throw out of all of the lore. I just think it's going to be a completely different area or an era or time. So I don't think either game world time frame is actually going to impact Next. It's going to be some completely different period of time. And they've pretty clearly said they're alternate universes. I think it was Dave who threw out the tweet that, all NORAS do touch, but they are all separate. So I think we're actually going to be looking at a different game world time frame altogether, and it really will be a true alternate universe.
That's awesome. Really good points there. How about you, Midian? Old EverQuest or post-shattering?
I'm kind of along the same lines. I don't think it's going to be either. I don't think it's going to be necessarily what you would consider an alternate universe. I do think somehow, you're dealing with a game that has lore revolving around gods. And in a world that you're dealing with gods, things can happen. And my prediction is that they're going to go back to the beginning. So EverQuest Next goes back to the beginning. Before EverQuest 1, before everything happens, and it kind of lets you relive the lore of the game and take part in historical events that they have talked about in stories and things of that nature. So I'm kind of seeing a scenario where a god saying, on the current timeline that we're on, Norath is going to be destroyed. I'm sending you, I believe her name's Verona, or one of the iconic people from EverQuest. I'm sending you back into time to reset the timeline so that the world can be saved. And so you kind of send them back into time, a.k.a. Spock into the new Star Trek, the way that they kind of reset that universe. And it's going to be the same universe, but it's going to be back in time. So I think they're going to go with before EverQuest 1.
I think that it's very possible. I still, you are in a universe where you can kill your gods. So somehow, I just think somehow EverQuest 2 are going to sort of come to a head, and that's what's going to spring out where we are at with EverQuest Next. Whether that's, the killing of an important god changes everything, I don't know. I think when I say alternate universe, I don't think they're going to recreate the lore completely. That just wouldn't make sense, because then why call it EverQuest? But you're, as far as when it happens, you're right. It very well could be before. That would make sense. Another interesting thing that I think we'll hopefully learn at Live.
Very good points. We have parallel universes and linear pathing and, going back in time. They can take the story anywhere. I'm going to reserve my thoughts on that until the next episode, though, because I think I kind of want to wait. Don't want to kind of get my hopes up and speculate where I think it should go, but I like where you both went with the topic. I think those are both interesting ways to go. Don't know where I am on that yet.
The real interesting thing that comes along is if they're tying the three games together in some way, and you have it so that EverQuest Next is actually the past. What if whatever you do in EverQuest Next has an effect on the other two games? So choices that players make have a literal effect, and new dungeons may pop up in areas in EverQuest and EverQuest 2, or there may be areas of the map that weren't there before, or choices that you make in the game that have ultimate effects on the other games. It could be a real interesting thing to do. I think it would be a developmental nightmare for you to do it, working across three entirely different platforms. But it is interesting. It's something that they could do.
Well, speaking on that topic, they just had a game. The name escapes me at the moment, but it's a game based on what's happening in a live TV show. If you guys, can't remember the name of this.
Defiance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're kind of doing that in that game right there. The technology's there. That's definitely a good point, Smitty, and they could actually do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they will be somehow connected. I don't think you're going to merge them all into one game. But yeah, I think somehow you're going to influence each other. To what degree, I don't know. The team has been throwing hints out of this like a lot, and I'm surprised not many other people have picked up on it. I think people have. It's just the idea is so advanced. Everyone sort of says that doesn't make any sense. They can't do that. They just, as far as their technology, they can't do that. But you look at the E3 interview. They actually start talking about how everything's a franchise now. That's not individual games. They're all part of the larger game. They actually went so far even as to say that they would interact with one another before they got cut off from saying any more. You start looking, I think it was February, March, here they are planning for EverQuest Next. Well, they're posting up a ton of jobs, dev jobs for EverQuest and EverQuest 2. Now, I wasn't aware of any recent layoffs, so why are they hiring? There's just a paper trail that sort of picks up everywhere. Going back to that tweet that David put out about alternative or parallel NORAS or whatever you want to call it, he did say they do connect. I think it was in the Etherneer, implying somehow they will connect. So there's a lot of little pieces here and there that are I think sort of pointing at the fact that you will be able to somehow influence the other game. And I think I think it is possible. I mean, one thing they've consistently said to us is they have a lot of new technology that's very exciting. A lot of things you've just not seen before. And even today, Brad McQuaid in one of his tweets said, they're putting in a lot of things that I wanted back when I was originally doing EverQuest and Vanguard, but they did not. I didn't have the technology then. They do now. So I think that somehow they will be connected. It might just be on a social level. I don't know, more than a gameplay, but somehow I think they will, and that's sort of how they're tying it in as an EverQuest brand.
I think those are great points. Definitely have to take into consideration that the technology that Sony has introduced has actually caused Blizzard to halt production on Titan. They actually took a step back to wait and see what EverQuest Next is going to bring to the table. I mean, it's going to be really big. We're going to see a lot of innovation here, and what better company to innovate than the leaders of, or the starters of the MMO genre itself.
Oh, I think you're right. I mean, that's what they did with World of Warcraft. They looked at EverQuest, made it better. Well, in a way better. And I think they realized, maybe they have an inside person, who knows, they realize something big's happening. We probably should wait. Now, of course, recent news with that, Activision Blizzard separating from their parent company, that might have had something to do with it too. But I think you're right. They're a little scared. They want to see what's there, what's new, and how can they perfect it.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I know for a fact that these guys have contacts within all the companies, and just like with movies, when one movie comes out about the Titanic, there's going to be 4 other copies coming out from other different studios. I know that they have the inside track on what's being developed, no matter how secretive a black box is. And I think that Blizzard had a crap their pants moment. I think that they were just like, Titan is just not going to be able to compete with this game. We might as well take the money that we have, put more time into development, and come up with these new tools and possibly steal things from EverQuest Next that they're developing. Because EverQuest Next is really the only game I've ever heard of that when they're still in a closed development without nobody knowing anything, they just said, man, we wiped everything. I mean, we started from scratch. Now, to the extent that they started, who really knows? But they're one of the only companies that have ever said, we need to do this right. All our eggs are into this basket. We're going to give the players what they want. They brought back probably the best design team I have ever seen. I mean, you got the original innovators of EverQuest and Vanguard, and I'm one of the few people that said Vanguard could have been World of Warcraft if they would have had a studio put the effort into it like Blizzard did. But at that point, no one really knew how profitable an MMO could be. Now everybody does. Like, everybody knows that you can make $1 billion a year with your company if you have a successful MMO. So I really think SOE is just like, we need to knock it out of the park with this one. We're going to correct our errors. And they really have the team to do it. So,
absolutely. Great point. Midian, and, bringing up Vanguard and its potential. And I, to this day, I still think that game was going to be it. They just didn't have enough time, and they were under the gun with that game to try to get it out as fast as possible. So we're coming to the end of the podcast. Just wanted to get some final thoughts. Basically, just final thoughts on best and worst case that's going to happen at SOE Live. Your wish list for EverQuest Next, what you want out of the game, so on and so forth. This question is directed at you first, Midian.
My hopes for the thing is that SOE really does knock it out of the park. I mean, I really like the company, and I've had an emotional roller coaster with them over the years as far as their games go. But they really do have a great community, a really great dev team there, and I really do wish the best for them. So I hope that they've learned from those mistakes of the past and they can correct them. But I also hope that they innovate with the game. I hope that they come up with stuff that I would have never thought of. All right, and they get the crafting with the adventure thing. They get that nailed down so that there's a symbiotic relationship. And I really hope it's a game that everyone can find some type of attachment to. And I mean, everybody says, let it be the next World of Warcraft or whatever. I just really hope it redefines the genre and it brings back social interaction with players, so that players just aren't a nuisance that you have to overcome to get your next piece of gear, but they're actually a vital part of the ecosystem of the server, and that you have to work with other people and you have to build instance groups instead of just queuing and all these kinds of things. I really hope that they get back to it being a social game and they really develop a world instead of just an interaction trying to develop a character and getting as much loot as quick as possible.
Yeah, for me, I think that the best case scenario, my wife gets close to divorcing me and wants to go hunt down all of the dev team to beat them up. Worst case scenario, Friday nights I'm watching Ancient Aliens still. It's a huge range. I think that this is a very good team. The people that they have are very approachable. They've been around the gaming industry for a very long time. I think you're right, Mid. They hopefully have learned from their mistakes. And I think they have. I think if they hadn't learned from their mistakes, they would have kept going with what they were doing, WoW 2.0 or whatever, and it would have failed. They realized they want to do something different. So for Live, I mean, I'm hoping that something comes out of that and it just leaves my jaw dropping on the floor and drooling to be able to get my hands on beta access to play this game. And that, 10, 15 years from now, much the same as EverQuest is now, I'm playing this game with my son. I mean, that's the best case scenario out of all of this. It's obviously going to be somewhere in the middle. I think, at least in the beginning, regardless of what they put out, I'm going to play. But I have some faith in them. I'm not as worn out on SOE as some folks are when you read the forums. I think they have really good ideas and good intentions. And I think we're going to learn that in just, a day or two. And I really believe that everyone's going to kind of sit back and say, wow, this game is going to be badass, and I can't wait to play it. That's my hope, and I think they can deliver. If they don't, I'm going to go hunt them down. I'll go out to San Diego, knock on the front door, ask them to give me something back, all the time I've spent with the EverQuest franchise. I think if they do this right, they not only will have a new game that will last for many years, they're going to bring back interest in the whole group of games. People that have given up on the previous two titles where Next maybe isn't their thing, they actually could maybe get back into all of this EverQuest system, and I think it could potentially be just a very good thing for them and blow out Blizzard. I have to say I don't think that that's their goal. From when I've done a lot of following of them, especially on social media, I think they just want to put out something they're proud of, and that's, I think if they can do that, people will flock to it.
I'd just like to chime in for the closing. My own best and worst cases. I'll go on and elaborate on what both Fan and Midian has said, and I think, I'll go with worst case first. Worst case, in my opinion, is they don't learn from their mistakes and they create another EverQuest 2 or Vanguard, which is rushed content, horrible beta testing, and just another World of Warcraft, aka EverQuest clone. I think that would drive, a lot of people away from EverQuest altogether. It'll definitely split the community because you'll have now like 3 or 4 games under the Sony umbrella, and everybody will just probably flock back to the other games that just do the dynamics better. Now, best case scenario, and I like what you said, Phantom X, on just putting out a game that they're proud of, and I think that's the way to go. If they have, if they stand by the passions that they spoke about in the videos and they stay true to their word, I think that this game is going to be the next generation MMO. They have the talent, they have the technology, and they're innovators. I think that's the way that they wanted it to be for EverQuest 2. I think that's the way they wanted it to be for Vanguard. I'm sorry that I'm repeating that over and over, but if they have learned from those mistakes and move forward, and they did start from scratch after looking at it and saying, okay, we're doing it all over again. Let's start from scratch, delete all of that, and let's get this show on the road and get something out that people are going to enjoy for the next 3, 4, maybe even 5 years. They may have another hit on their hands, and I think that they will indeed restore that magic that we're all looking for one more time.
So there you have it, folks. The first collaboration on the EQNexus podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, I'm your host, DJ Sid. We also had Midian and Phantom X from EQNexus.com as well, featured in the podcast. Right now, it's 2:42, Friday, August 2nd. I got to prepare for the live broadcast of EverQuest Next myself. So, without further ado, thanks for tuning in. Come visit us on the forums. Check us out. It's going to explode. 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 It's going to explode.